Resuming debate, the honourable member for Calgary Midnapore.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. First of all, Mr. Speaker, I'd like to indicate that I will be splitting my time with the member from Elgin, Middlesex, London. I look forward to those remarks as well. I cannot begin, Mr. Speaker, without starting with thanking the constituents of Calgary Midnapore for sending me here back again. I'm so very overjoyed to be back in this House representing them. I'm truly grateful. And Mr. Speaker, I will have you know that my parents are my constituents. So my mom is probably watching, so I promise to be extra good in the House at this time. I will say that.
But also, Mr. Speaker, I can say that today I am very saddened, and that's because of my family as well. Because my mother is from Quebec, my father is from Saskatchewan, and so I think that we have a lot of families in Canada like that, perhaps with one parent who comes from the west and the other from the east. And I think that there's a similar story to that on the other side of the House from last week. But I can say that even though this is a Canadian story, that now we are a divided family, a family divided, and that is a really sad thing. But I can also say that we are divided because there was a lot of policies from the other side of the House over the past 4 years that really divided us, that completely divided Canadians. There were a great many situations where, people were pitted against each other, and that is a very sad thing. And I'm thinking of my region, Alberta. Regions were pitted against each other, and Alberta had no support at all for the energy industry. We can think of a number of bills passed in this House. For example, C-69, obviously. With C-69, it's now virtually impossible to develop any new energy projects. With C-48, it's virtually impossible to go forward with any pipelines in order to transport oil, and that's really, really sad. And obviously, the carbon tax is a bad thing too. But with their bill against the energy sector, that comes with consequences, Mr. Speaker. Very dire consequences for families, for individuals. In fact, bills like that one destroy families. Those bills destroy people's lives because the government says that it wants to eliminate poverty, but it's creating poverty with bills like this one. In fact, Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister on many occasions has said one thing to one region of the country and something completely different to another region of the country. So I think that the President of the United States used a sentence for that. He called the Prime Minister two-faced, Mr. Speaker. And people from Canada saw this, just as the President of the U.S. did. So with the speech from the throne, the Prime Minister had an opportunity to reach out to all regions of the country. But unfortunately, that didn't happen. There were a number of actions. For example, he designated a minister specifically to shore up relations among the provinces. There were a number of meetings with the provincial premiers across the country, the premiers from the territories as well. And in fact, the Prime Minister and the Deputy Prime Minister promised that they would listen very, very hard to all provinces. And so this speech from the throne was a true opportunity to show that they did listen. But unfortunately, the speech from the throne did not show any evidence of that. Unfortunately, it was just the same old thing all over again.
But not much was said. There were platitudes like talking about the good of our community, and cliches such as no challenges are too big. There were also false attempts to show empathy and understanding for regions. Mr. Speaker, there were parts of the speech that said things like, as much as they have instructed you to work together, Canadians have also spoken clearly about the importance of their regions and their local needs. But what did they say, Mr. Speaker, when they spoke? Did they say how their father hasn't been able to find a job in 3 years because the corporation he was working for left because of instability due to political regulation? Did they say how their neighbor can't get out of a deep depression because they have spent their entire retirement savings on just surviving? Did they say that they sent a suicide note to their member of parliament because they've absolutely given up hope of ever finding a job? We don't know, Mr. Speaker, and we'll never know because it wasn't in the speech from the throne. The speech said, regional needs and differences really matter. Today's regional economic concerns are both justified and important. But, Mr. Speaker, in what year is it on the planetary spacecraft that Canada's energy workers get an apology from this Prime Minister when he sheds a tear for those who've committed suicide because they're completely destitute, or for the women and children who've been beaten because after years of not having a job, Dad finally snapped? What year on the spaceship is that, Mr. Speaker? Is that when we know that regional differences really matter? For now, we don't, because this speech doesn't say so. And this was the opportunity, Mr. Speaker, to demonstrate action. If not action, true understanding. If not true understanding, Mr. Speaker, at least respect. And it wouldn't have taken much. A timeline for the TMX pipeline, a promise to just look into the National Energy Corridor. But it wasn't there. Nous pouvons faire semblant que la...
We can pretend that the world is simple and that complexity and details are not necessary to solve our problems here in Canada. But that's not the truth. We can pretend that we don't need other people and that we are not interdependent. But that's not true either, Mr. Speaker. And people who ignore this are going to make us suffer, even though they might refuse to recognize that today.
I can tell you, this is not the way of Albertans. And, Mr. Speaker, what a great day to be in the House. The day when my predecessor and now Premier, the incomparable, the Honourable Jason Kenney, is here to get a fair deal for Alberta. Yeah. He brings with him, Mr. Speaker, my counterpart, Minister of Children's Services and MLA for Calgary Shaw, Rebecca Schultz. I can tell you, Mr. Speaker, together, Minister Schultz and I will work tirelessly for the children of this nation. Mr. Speaker, in closing, we Albertans love Canada. We love Canada. We have always been proud to work hard and to share the fruits of our labor with the nation, to do our part for Confederation. We have never told others how to live their lives or that their way of life is not welcome in our country. So we will not let this Prime Minister divide us, and we will not let this government push us out of Confederation. We will not allow it to happen. This government had an opportunity to do something profound, to say something profound, to unify, and they didn't. Et ça, c'est la raison pour laquelle...
And that's why today, Mr. Speaker, I am sad. I am a woman from Alberta, but my mother's from Quebec and my father's from Saskatchewan. And I'm here for unity. I'm here for Canada. But the speech from the throne, unfortunately, no, it didn't work for Canadians. Thank you.
Question.